Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Just so we can get to know each other a little bit. I know you know me, you know why you're here, we hope, but I don't know you. So by a show of hands, who lives here in Jerusalem? Great. Wow, great. And who was born in another country? The exact same group. Okay. And who's been here, say, 17 years and speaks barely any Hebrew? Don't worry, the whole rest of the show is in English. Are there any Orthodox Jews here? I know it's hard for Orthodox Jews to raise their hands. They don't like to be on lists. Why does he want us to raise our hands? Yeah. Are there any Reform or Conservative Jews here? Or Orthodox Jews who used to be Reform and Conservative? Any Orthodox Jews who were Irish, Italian, raised in Philadelphia, Catholic, had 3 circumcisions, and have been in recovery for 37 years? Just me? Is it warm in here? It's not just that I'm the only one dressed for Poland in the 1700s. When people see me, they often ask, are you Haredi, ultra-Orthodox? Obviously, I'm not Haredi. I'm wearing a blue shirt. Though I did bring my Haredi briefcase. What is it with the plastic bag, right? $3,000 on a fur hat. You can't buy a canvas bag? I'm not saying you have to go to Coach, but somewhere between the $3,000 fur hat and the free plastic bag, there's got to be a middle ground. I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia. A quiet little house, a quiet little street, 2 quiet little parents, and a quiet little sister, and a cat. And I hated it. All I ever wanted to be was from the Bronx, Brooklyn, Harlem, Compton, just somewhere where stuff happened. Now I live in Jerusalem, where far too much happens. So I live here in Jerusalem, and I brought some stuff from Jerusalem. I brought this. This is a bag of Holy Land earth. This is dirt that you can buy here in Israel to bring to your friends in America. They love dirt from Israel. You don't have to buy it. I swear, just put it in a Ziploc bag, bring it to. They love dirt because the land of Israel is holy, right? I mean, it's generally accepted that we're a holy people. But there's actually an argument in the tradition. Is the land of Israel holy? Some of the sages say yes. Some of the sages say no. This question was answered for me unequivocally recently in downtown Jerusalem when I watched a man park his car. Before he got out of the car, he put a handicap placard in his windshield. But when his foot touched the land, he was healed. He walked away from the car with no visible handicap. I screamed, Baruch Hashem! Thank God, I wanted to hug him. He was not nearly as moved by his healing as I was. I mean, he had been handicapped. I had watched him park. I am the firstborn son of a manic-depressive Italian woman and a pathologically silent Irishman. This makes me wildly emotional in a very quiet way. I look calm, I'm just going nuts on the inside. I grew up Catholic. My parents went to Catholic school all the way through college. My mother then went into the convent. Thank God she left. Otherwise, only half of me would be standing here, and it would be the quiet Irish half. My aunt, though, was a nun, which makes Jesus my uncle. I'm not making that up. That's church doctrine. She's a bride of Christ. She's my aunt. He's my uncle. I only mention that in Jerusalem for parking. So I've been sober in recovery for 37 years. I know, you're like, what? One of my big breaks in show business, actually, when I was still in Los Angeles. Do you remember that Budweiser commercial with the black guys that were like, what's up, what's up, what's up? Well, a guy gathered a bunch of black guys like me and made a shalom commercial. Shalom, shalom. We just called each other, shalom, shalom, shalom. Okay, maybe it wasn't such a big break, but. So I had my first drink when I was 9 years old. I waited. No, really, I could have used a drink on the way to kindergarten. Really, for 5 years I've been hanging out every day with the same woman. Suddenly she takes me to a room full of people my size and leaves me there. You can't tell me that bourbon wouldn't have taken the edge off nap time. I was staying at my cousin's house. He was older than me, and he and his friends were drinking Carling Black Label beer. They told me I could be the bartender. I could open up everybody's beer and take the first sip. Well, if you're only allowed one sip, take a big sip. I mean, I'm an alcoholic, not an idiot. And I got drunk. And later that night, alcohol gave me the freedom to walk up to a grown man who was walking his dog, put my arm around his shoulder, look him in the eye, and say, "Get bent." I don't know what that means tonight. But it was the ability. Alcohol gave me the ability to look a man in the eye and say, "Get bent." Now, I stand before you 5 feet 8 inches tall. This is as tall as I've ever been. When I was 9, I was a lot shorter. So I'm not sure this happened, but that's the way it felt. Later that night, alcohol gave me the freedom to throw up in my sleeping bag. So as to not get caught, my cousin wouldn't let me let his mother clean my sleeping bag. So alcohol gave me the ability to sleep in my puke for a week. Oh, it's not that bad. I mean, the first night it's bad, but you kind of wipe it out and you're drunk, and the next night it's starting to flake off, and by the end of the week you barely remember vomiting there. The next time I drank 16 Genesee cream ales. I drank 16 because that's as many as I could drink. About halfway through, my friend's sister came up to me and she said, "Stop drinking now. You are not going to get any drunker. Your body can't process alcohol any faster. If you continue to drink, all you're going to do is ruin tomorrow." Okay. I have always, drunk or sober, been willing to ruin tomorrow in the hopes of making tonight just a little bit better. Which is why I offer a piece of advice. If it's after 11 o'clock at night and it sounds like a good idea, don't do it. The next time I drank, we drank Monkey Brew. Got a big jar and everybody stole something with alcohol in it. That night we were drinking vodka, gin, bourbon, beer, wine, and champagne. It had foam and the foam was purple. And I swear to you, it swirled in the glass while it sat on the table, like a potion. We drank that, we went to a school dance. My best friend Matt threw up on a nun. It wasn't a spiritual experience for her, but it was for us. And on the last night of my drinking, I had a hit-and-run accident with a Catholic priest. I made a brave and daring getaway, and he caught me. He asked me if I'd been drinking. I said, "No, Father, I wasn't thinking." This was as close to a burning bush as I'll ever get. He asked for the license and registration. I handed him the entire contents of the glove compartment. This is my mom's car, so this is maps to places we've never been, games to play on trips we never took, a book of sonnets, lots of mom tissue, you know, that balled up tissue, you don't know if it's been used or it's just been in her purse forever. It was the next day that I met a group of people in a church basement who told me they could help me stop drinking as long as I found a power greater than myself by which I could live. Obviously, they meant God. No, they said it didn't have to be God. They said it could be electricity. They said if I didn't think that electricity was a power greater than myself, I should go stick my finger in the socket. But I wasn't interested in building an ongoing, developing relationship with electricity. So I tried other things. I tried meditation. I bought a candle. I lit the candle. I sat cross-legged in front of the candle, resting my hands on my thighs. I closed my eyes, and my very first thought was, if I close my eyes, why did I light the candle? Because with my luck, The meditation will work. I'll be transported out of the room, but the candle will fall over and the house will burn down. I once got a ticket driving to the Mount Baldy Zen Center going 85 because I was late for a sitting meditation. The California Highway Patrolman leaned in the window and said, "Where are you off to, son?" I said, "The Zen Center." He said, "You better slow down or you're going to screw up your chi." I didn't even know what chi was. But I arrived and I was panicked. I was late. And they said, "You can't be late. You're here." I said, "I know, but I was supposed to be here an hour ago." But they said, "You weren't here an hour ago." I said, "I know, but the thing started at 8:30. They said, "But you're here now, and it's 9:30, which pissed me off and made it hard to meditate, I must admit. But when the session began, the guy stood up and he said, "Remember, it's okay to fart, but not to cough." And then we were supposed to start meditating. Can you imagine this president of the shul standing up on Shabbos morning? "Thank the Cohens for the Kiddush. Thank the readers and the daveners. Thank you. Remember, it's okay to fart, but not to cough." I tried going to hear the Catholic Mass said in Creole, the language Haitians speak. I don't speak Creole. I thought maybe if I didn't understand what they were saying, it wouldn't bug me so much. It got through. It's kind of the problem I'm having now with Hebrew. The more I understand, I'm like, we're praying for what? 5 days after high school graduation, I moved to Florida. Should have known then I was going to be a Jew. I figured I would take my retirement first. When I arrived in Florida, I met this beautiful young Jewish woman. And she gave me books to read. One of them was Exodus. I read Exodus. I was ready to move to Israel. Turn the desert green. Build the state. It was 1983. State was largely built. Desert was as green as it was going to get. Years later, a rabbi asked me, she said, no laugh. When I perform for Haredi audiences and I say she said after saying rabbi, they laugh. Because they don't know. They don't read the papers. They think that's the joke. Guys, my wife's a rabbi. I'm a Rebbetz's man. So she said, what got you interested in Judaism? I said, I read Exodus. She got that starry-eyed look that rabbis get, and she said, the Bible is a very powerful book. No. I read the novel Exodus. Leon Uris's Exodus. Talk about fake news. No, I read this book. I was ready to move to Israel. I imagined myself digging avocados out of the earth. How should I know they grow in trees? I'm from Philly. Where I come from, they grow in aisle 6 next to the tomatoes. And anyway, this story can't have trees because as I'm digging, I look up and I see her. She crests the hill on her steed and rides towards me, crossing the plain, kicking up a trail of dust. She has long, flowing, curly brown hair, long, flowing, curly black hair, short blonde hair. It doesn't really matter. She pulls up on her steed, and I'm taller. Tanner, with a gun on my back, and more hair. By the way, these aren't payas. This is the beginning of a comb-over. You tell me in the back, right? With a properly placed kippah, you can't even tell I'm losing a little hair up top. My fear is I do the whole rest of the show with a big lick of hair across my forehead. Look like some possessed professor. She pulls up and she speaks to me and she says, there's trouble on the ridge. She wouldn't talk like that, but that's the only accent I know. Having been to Israel, I realize now she'd be speaking Hebrew, I'd be speaking English. She'd speak for the requisite amount of time, and then I'd say, Toda, bavakasha. Thank you, and you're welcome, or please, depending upon the context. But in my version, she pulls me up on the horse and we ride off into the sunset to shoot things. When I first converted, the first rabbi I converted with, I said, what do I have to do to convert? He said, you have to answer these 5 questions in the affirmative. Shouldn't he have told me the questions before he told me the answers? Yes, 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 yes. What are the questions? They were these. 1, did I come to this decision of my own free will? Yes. 2, did I sever any former religious affiliations? Yes. I didn't write the Pope and say I'm out. I think he knew. 3, would I throw my lot in with the Jewish people come what may? Yes. What does that mean? This was suburban Los Angeles, 1994. My name was Chris Campbell. I didn't wear a hat or a hat under my hat. I didn't wear black and blue, tzitzit. I didn't have a beard or payas. When your name is Chris Campbell and you look like that, when they come for the Jews, you say, they went that way. 4, would I become an active part of the Jewish community? Yes. And 5, if ever blessed with children, would I raise them as Jews? Yes. We learned some crazy stuff. In this Introduction to Judaism class, we learned that on Friday night we cover the challah, the 2 loaves of bread that we use to celebrate Shabbat. We cover them so that they're not uncomfortable. That's what the rabbi said. He said we say the blessing on the wine first, but really the bread is more important, so we cover it so it won't feel bad. And then we learned that on the second night of Hanukkah, we light the second Hanukkah candle first. You know why? Because it's new. That's what he said. It's new. It might feel uncomfortable standing next to a candle that burned last night. Now, I'm not insane. And I happen to know that on the second night of Hanukkah, the first night candle's just as new as the second night candle. They're both brand new. Last night's candle's gone. It's never coming back. But suddenly it occurs to me, if this is a people, if this is a culture, if this is a religion that cares so much about the feelings of a candle, how must they treat people? Not so well, I find out. So I did a reform and a conservative conversion in Los Angeles, and I wanted to be more traditionally observant, so I moved into the neighborhood, in the Pico neighborhood, and I got a roommate, a guy who grew up Orthodox, knew everything, did nothing. But he said we could have a kosher kitchen, and then he heard me talking to my conservative rabbi on the phone, and he said, conservative hechsher on the kitchen? He said, I got these Orthodox cousins. They're not going to be comfortable with a kitchen that was koshered by a conservative rabbi. So he was a young lawyer and starting to do well, so he wanted to give some tzedakah, some charity, not the kind where you don't get anything back. So he joined the local modern Orthodox synagogue, so at least he would get a newsletter. So out of respect for him, I called his new rabbi and I said, hi, this is Chris Campbell. I'm your new congregant's roommate. You can imagine what that sounds like in Los Angeles. This is the part where I always like to stop and thank our gay and lesbian brothers and sisters. And I'll tell you why. Because I live here in Jerusalem. And a number of years ago, when they announced they were going to have their Pride Parade here in Jerusalem, this brought together the rabbis of Jerusalem and the imams of Jerusalem and the Christian clergy. And they met. Now, these people never meet. But not only did they meet, they came forth with a joint proclamation saying, please don't affect the peace of our city. Where did they live? But in the end, it wasn't a parade, it was an event, because the police said it would take 12,000 police officers to protect the gays and lesbians from the Haredim. Which made me think, now we know that the ultra-Orthodox here don't go in the army, but I'm thinking maybe they should. No, because 12,000 police officers is a lot of police officers. We don't even have to tell them they're in the army. We'll just tell them there's a pride parade in Lebanon. They'll be in Beirut by the afternoon prayer. So finally, the rabbi came over to the house and he showed me through the kitchen and he said, this you can keep, this you have to throw away, this you have to put in my wife's 2,000-degree self-cleaning oven. If it comes out, it's yours. If it doesn't, it never was. And as we finished the tour of the kitchen, he said, listen, I got to tell you, there are some members of this community that will not accept this as a kosher kitchen simply by your using it. Which I thought was rather brave, because it was my kitchen and I knew where the knives were. But he said there's 3 things you can do. 1, only cook with your roommate, Eric. So, okay, just let me get this straight. I'm the conservative and reform convert. I'm Shomer Mitzvot. I observe all the mitzvot of Shabbat and Kashrut. I keep all the mitzvahs. As long as I only cook with my cigarette smoking on Shabbat, car driving on Shabbat, money spending on Shabbat, computer using on Shabbat, born to a Jewish mother roommate, everything will be kosher. Yes. 2, only cook 1 ingredient meals. Hey everybody, let's go to my house for broccoli Shabbat. I steamed up some broccoli and then I threw some spears in the freezer so we could have broccoli pops later on. I thought we'd start with some broccoli, maybe sing a song, have a word of Torah, maybe have some more broccoli, perhaps another song, then maybe make some tea from that green liquid in the bottom of the pot. Still only 1 ingredient. Before finishing off the evening with those broccoli pops I promised you earlier on. Or 3, he said, convert to Judaism. I looked at the rabbi and I said, I've already converted to Judaism twice. So people always ask me, what was your parents' response to all this? I mean, I didn't show up at their house dressed like this and scream, Goyim! I just thought it. But I think in the end, really, they were proud of me because all their friends had lapsed Catholic children. And let's face it, I win that round. You don't get any more lapsed than this. But it was the last time through their house on my way to Israel for the first time that on Friday morning I sat them down and I said, okay, this is what we have to do in order to properly celebrate Shabbat. I said, we've got to leave these lights on and we've got to leave these lights off. We've got to leave some boiling water for the whole day and night in the kitchen. We've got to put some aluminum foil on that sensor in the driveway so the light doesn't come on when I come home from dinner. I mean, they knew there was no Eruv, I'm sure. But I explained there was no fishing line around their neighborhood, effectively turning the public into the private. So we would have to leave the doors unlocked for the entire day, as I couldn't carry a key. I said, we're going to have to tear some paper towels in the kitchen and toilet paper in all the bathrooms. My mother fought every step of the way. She said, look, we're ecologists. We don't leave lights on in rooms we're not in. And I don't know what that aluminum foil thing is. We're not leaving water boiling on the stove for the whole Shabbat. And that paper towel thing and toilet paper, that's just weird. And this neighborhood isn't nearly as safe as it used to be. We are not leaving the doors unlocked. My father didn't say a word until I got to the end, and I said, and of course, you know we're going to have to turn the light off in the refrigerator, because opening the door and turning on the light would be an act of creation. My father looked at me and he said, you think God cares whether the light comes on in your refrigerator when you open the door on Shabbat? Now, when you say it that way, I mean, maybe God is more concerned with, say, the whole of Europe or Africa. But that was the summer of 2000. And a few months later, Joe Lieberman was nominated, and many would say elected, Vice President of the United States. And I called my father and I said, Dad, Joe Lieberman might become the second most powerful man in the entire world. And I promise you one thing. He turns the light off in his refrigerator before Shabbat. To which my father said, you think God cares whether the light comes on in Joe Lieberman's refrigerator on Shabbat? So I came to Israel. I came to Israel on an El Al flight, Israel's national airline, the most secure airline in the entire world. You can imagine their reaction when a guy dressed like this shows up with a passport that says Christopher Campbell. They're like, we got him! Yeah! Yeah! They think I just forgot to switch the passport. So they ask, why did you convert to Judaism? I tell them the whole story. I think you're going to get away with asking me my bar mitzvah portion. I tell them, I say I was seeking a community of people with which I could struggle to have a relationship with God. Maybe not have that relationship, but struggle to have that relationship. El Al is not interested in putting people on airplanes that are struggling to have a relationship with God. They don't even like vegetarian meal requests. Before I came to Israel, I thought Israel would be like New York, but with more Jews. It's not. It's like Saudi Arabia, but with less Arabs. When I got here, I immediately went to Ulpan. For those of you that don't know, Ulpan means school for someone who has spent their entire life speaking one language, who now wants to learn another entirely different, crazy language. When I first converted, they told me there's no Hebrew word for hell. There's a Hebrew word for hell, Ulpan. My first Hebrew teacher said, the beauty of Hebrew is so few words. Can I just say that in English we have a word for, say, elephant and a word for, say, bridge? Because they're totally different things. The Hebrew verb levaker means to visit. The Hebrew verb levaker, same verb, conjugated the same way, means to criticize. Is that not Jewish? No, that the verb to visit is the verb to criticize? I visited my mother, she criticized me. One verb. The low point for me in Ulpan was I was walking in the neighborhood I now live in one day with my friend Saskia, and we came upon a woman screaming at her poodle. And I looked at Saskia and I said, Saskia, that dog knows more Hebrew than I do. No, because the dog seemed to understand what the woman was saying. And I had not a clue. When I had my first conversion, they told me I had to have a hatafat dam brit. When they say it in Hebrew in America, it's so you won't understand what they're talking about. Because Chatafat Dam Brit sounds like Hachikichiwa. I'll have a Hachikichiwa. I'll have two. What they're talking about is ritual bloodletting, not from your thumb. Traditionally, conversion to Judaism consists of three parts. Beit Din, religious court. Mikveh, immersion in a living body of water. And Brit Milah, circumcision. Now, I was born in a Catholic hospital in 1963, and I was circumcised. Thank God. I don't know if that was President Kennedy's responsibility or the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Surgeon General, whoever it was. Thank you. And my rabbi, in the Reform setting, said, look, you're already circumcised. That's good enough for me. But the mikveh lady, ooh. It's always the mikveh lady. She said, what are you talking about? That was a medical procedure. This is a religious covenant. So she sends me to a urologist in North Hollywood. I arrive in the doctor's office. She gives me that robe you wear at a doctor's office. It's open in the back. For a circumcision, you just wear it open to the front. She brings me into the office. She sits me down. She says, wash your penis for 3 minutes. That was 10 seconds. I don't think I've ever washed my penis for 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, I'm not washing anymore. Actually, after 3 minutes, I'm done. I waited 5 minutes. I wanted them to think I was serious. I brought a book. Who brings a book to a circumcision? The doctor came in, he said, we have to draw blood and pray in Hebrew. We'll pray as hard as we can, we'll draw as little blood as possible. I have never prayed so hard in my entire life. Then I went to the mikveh. The mikveh lady brought me in. My mother had come out to Los Angeles for my first conversion. At lunch, after the mikveh, I took my mother to lunch, and in the middle of lunch, I said, you know, Mom, someday I may become a rabbi. My Italian Catholic mother stopped eating, put down her fork, looked at me and said, you'll do anything to avoid getting a real job. How did she know? I don't even think she knows that many rabbis. But at the mikveh lady took us inside. Her name was Lillian Seltzer. But could the mikveh lady's name really be Seltzer? She took us in, she showed us the mikveh. This was at the University of Judaism in Bel Air, California. Bel Air, if you don't know Bel Air looks down on Beverly Hills. Literally. It sits on the hill line. Beverly Hills is in the valley. Spiritually, financially, socially, psychologically, Bel Air looks down. Bel Air is where President Reagan used to daven. At the Presbyterian shul across the street. She took us into the mikveh. It was a beautiful cobalt blue tile. They didn't have a wave machine, but you could see where they'd put it if they got one. And she showed us the mikveh and she said, this is an absolutely pure living body of water. Once you go into this absolutely pure living body of water, and the third time she said absolutely pure, I noticed a small hair floating on the water. And when she left, I got out the skimmer. Well, they had one. I mean, it was Bel Air. I'm surprised there wasn't a cabana boy. Oh boy, there's a hair in my mikveh. And get me a hachikichiwa, would you? I didn't want the hair to become Jewish and me to stay in my present state. You know, I've told that story for years about the single hair. And then I came to Jerusalem and started to go to the mikveh at the Stieblock in Katamon, where there are clumps of hair the size of small rodents floating in the water. You would need a crossbow as opposed to a skimmer. And there's always 3 big chassids in the mikveh with you. which is helpful because there's no blessing when you go into a mikveh unless there's 3 big chassids sitting next to you, and then you're like, please God, don't let me touch anyone. Please God, don't let anyone touch me. Father O'Connor, is that you? Shame on you. A year later, I did an adult bar mitzvah in that synagogue. I'm the only Jew I know that wore the same suit to his bris as to his bar mitzvah. My beard is my best friend. It is totally socially acceptable to fondle my beard. No one will ever say anything. They'll think I'm thinking. You see me, you look at me, you say he has food in his beard. I say, I have one more shirt that didn't need to go to the dry cleaner. I would take my beard to the airport if it needed a ride, or lend it 100 shekels. That's how close my beard and I are. I love Orthodox Judaism because he's thinking. Don't interrupt him. And I think we don't recognize the mutual Jewish-Muslim beard fetish. I was once in Foot Locker in New York, and this giant Muslim guy walked over to me dressed as a referee, and he said, "Hey man, nice beard." All the people in America think it's dangerous living in Jerusalem. No, because I was mugged once in New York by 3 guys on the A train. And I was mugged in LA once by one guy with a gun, which is proof to me that technology takes away jobs. I mean, it is, let's face it, it is dangerous. I mean, do you remember this story about, I don't know, it's close to 10 years now. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, killed a master Hamas bomb maker. Do you remember this? The guy had 1 arm and no legs. I'm going to say he wasn't a master bomb maker. I'm going to say he was a mildly proficient bomb maker. At best. But my question is this. If you show up for master bomb making class and the teacher has 1 arm and no legs, can you defer till next semester? I can't promise it'll happen to you, but I married my Gemara teacher. Yeah. I stalked her basically long enough to convince her I wasn't stalking her. I mean, I'm grateful that I was going to Pardes, because had I been going to a more traditional yeshiva, say I was at the Mir, and I married my Gemara teacher, I'd be married to like an 80-year-old chain-smoking rabbi, and we'd be going to the parade. We got married in March of 2002. March was that horrible month. 126 Israelis were killed or injured in terror attacks in the month of March of 2002. You know that if 126 Israelis were killed or injured, countless more hundreds of Palestinians were. It was a horrible month for everyone. 2 weeks before the wedding, we're arguing with the hotel about how many waiters per table. A week before the wedding, we're arguing with the hotel about how many armed guards. We want 12 armed guards. They want 9 armed guards and 3 guys with walkie-talkies. I said, look, unless you hit the guy right in the head with the walkie-talkie, it's not going to help. Menachem, yes, he's here. Great. One of the great things about our wedding was that my parents visited. That my parents didn't visit that much, and you kind of know, living 7,000 miles away from your parents, they're not going to visit that much. I mean, luckily, a few years after we got married, we spent a couple years in New York while I was doing a show, and And we got to see my parents a lot more because they lived in Philadelphia. And we still saw Avital's parents because they live here in Jerusalem. But when we moved to New York, we still saw them more than my parents in Philadelphia because they're Jewish. They were like there. We got on the plane, they dropped us off. We arrived in New York, they were like, hi. We moved into our apartment across the hall, they were like, hi. That's crazy, you guys live right there. My parents were like, try and visit in the summer. But it was good that we were there for 2 years because right before the show opened, at the beginning of the second year, my father got very sick. And without going into all the gory details, it was there that I started to see the differences in death and dying rituals between the Jews and the Catholics. My parents weren't practicing Catholics. My father went to Mass again, but simply to drive a friend who couldn't drive anymore. My mother still hated the Pope. Not this Pope, the poor Pope. And not the previous Pope, the Nazi Pope. Oh, he wasn't a Nazi. He was a member of the Hitler Youth. And he deserted the German army in 1945. Might I remind you, Hitler deserted the German army in 1945? Everything to my mother was the Pope. Global warming, damn Pope. Murders increase in Europe, damn Pope. No recycling in her neighborhood, damn Pope. Paper cut, damn Pope. Magnum PI preempted, damn Pope. So my father got sick. He's in the hospital. One day, Avital and I are going down to get a cup of coffee, and we come in the elevator. There's a priest. So they say, hey, Father, would you go visit my father? He's in room 415. The guy looks at me weird. I said, I'm not Catholic, but he is. We come back with the coffee, and my mother says, some priest tried to bust in here. Damn Pope. My father dies, and my mother announces he's going to be cremated. Now, she's been telling us she wants to be cremated for like 40 years. And in those 40 years, he never mentioned it once. So I fought her. I fought her hard. I fought my uncle. I fought. And we buried him. But she said, I'm making you promise that when I die, you'll cremate me. I said, Mom, I'll cremate. And for the memorial service, because it was in the funeral home, not in the church, we rented a priest. Rented one. Like out of a book. This guy we got our money's worth. You would have thought him and my father had grown up together. He was like, Jim has received his just reward. He is in heaven. Why are you sad? Do not be sad, be happy. I stood up and refuted everything. I gave the Jewish view. I said, there's time for happiness. Today is not it. I am probably the only pallbearer in the history of St. Denis Church and Cemetery to carry a casket dressed like this, following a bagpiper playing I Will Go Home to Quintel, wherever that is. But it was strange, the funeral, the burial. We got to the grave, and we put the casket over the grave, and the funeral director gave everyone a flower, said, place it on the casket and say goodbye. And then he said, that's it, we're done. I said, done? I came for a burial. He said, what? I said, I have to bury my father. I have to see the casket go into the ground. He said, not in front of all these people. I said, they know. That's why they're here too. This will not shock anyone. Reluctantly, he lowers the casket into the ground. And then I said, I'm going to need a shovel. For what? I said, to put dirt in the hole. I'm going to need to see and hear dirt hit my father's casket. Two weeks later, I got an email from my sister. She says, the stonemason wants to put Mom's name and birthday on the stone now. I said, Mom is still alive. She said, yes, but the stonemason said it would be easier for him to put her name on the stone now with Dad's name. I said, oh, if it's easier for the stonemason, well, let's just put her death date on there now, too. To which my sister replied, but she's still alive. I said, I know. But if it's easier for the stonemason, we'll pick a day that's far away. And if we get to that day, we'll kill her. That day turned out to be December 24th, 2016. We did not kill her. My mother died on Christmas Eve of last year. One final nose at the damn Pope. The only thing that would have made my mother happier is if she could have died on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Damn Pope. When my father died, he died on a Tuesday. I called the funeral director and said, how fast can you bury him? He said, Friday, which seemed long. I called my sister and she said, what's the rush? So in the end, it was Monday, a week later. Now, Jews, we bury as fast as possible, preferably the day someone dies, and then we sit for a week, talk about them, and eat. The Irish, they sit for a week, talk about the person, and eat, and then bury them at the end. No one seemed to be bothered by the fact that my father was in a refrigerator 2 towns over. I just hope for his sake that they left the light on for Shabbat. A couple of days after my mom died, we went to the funeral director. No rush. My sister said, you know, look, if you're uncomfortable with cremation, we can bury Mom. I said, no, her will cremate. And we got there, and the funeral director said, look, I know you want to bury the ashes. We can put some of them in the ground. If you'd like, we can give you an urn with some of the ashes, or perhaps 2 urns since you live in different places, which was weird. And then it got really weird. He said, if you'd like, we can put some of your mom in cufflinks. You can take a piece of your mom home in a tie clip or a U.S. flag pendant. Would you like her baked into an ashtray? Or perhaps a world's greatest mom mug with just a little bit of mom inside. I was like, you know, can you put her in the TV remote? So she and I can watch PBS forever? So now I stand before you an orphan. There's nothing like the death of your parents to get you thinking about what kind of parent you are. How are you raising your kids? Avital and I have 4 kids. Or as they say in Jerusalem, only 4 kids. And I think I'm a pretty good parent. I mean, Avital's the kind of parent that when she travels, she brings home 1 quality gift for each child. I'm the other kind of parent. I travel with carry-on to go and 3 duffel bags coming back. She thinks I'm moving America to Israel 3 suitcases at a time. I just buy whatever is on sale. It doesn't matter. They don't care. They don't play with it. They don't look at it. They just get it. They go, I mean, I go through customs. I'm like a Lego mule. I'm like the largest Nerf gun dealer in the Middle East. Abu Nidal needs a Nerf gun, he calls me. And you know, it's crazy toys today. I went to the store when my daughter was about 4 to buy a Barbie. You know they have Barbie, right? The Barbie we know, scantily clad. Let's call her Malibu Barbie. Then they have Architect Barbie. Do you know that Architect Barbie costs $10 more than Slut Barbie? When our twins are born, the oldest two, our children are IVF, so it's kind of crazy because like one of our kids was 2 days old for 2 years. He was frozen for 2 years. He's very nervous around the refrigerator. Really, a cold draft makes him tense up. No, but when she was pregnant with the twins, she was on bed rest for 10 weeks. They were born small. They were born early. Twins often are. They were like 5 weeks early. They were small. Tuvi was born at 2.2 kilos, which is, I don't know how many pounds, because I didn't believe them when they said the metric system was going to catch on. Abigail was born at 1.6 kilos. You don't come home until you're 2 kilos. So she went to the neonatal intensive care at Hadassah Har Tzofim, and she gained 25% of her body weight in 17 days. Thanks in large part to the Russian nurses of Hadassah Har Tzofim. I fed her first meal when she was 24 hours old. She dropped from 1.6 to 1.5 kilos. 5 cc's of formula in the nipple of a bottle. They didn't even attach a bottle to it. For days, I would feed her, and I would say, I think she's had enough, and the nurse would say, she will eat! I fed Comrade Stalin, I will feed her. Do you think taping the bottle to her head is a good idea? She came home at 17 days old wearing this. It's from the Gap. She had American grandparents. Tag says, Baby Gap, newborn, preemie, 0 to 5 pounds. Can I just say that a 0-pound baby does not need clothes? I mean, they must know that at the Gap, right? That's all they do is clothe people. I imagine at the Gap they have a lot of meetings, right? And they all sit around and matching color coordinated sweater cord combos, and they drink Starbucks coffee, and they eat low-fat muffins though they don't need to. And someone from the tag department stood up and said, the tag will say Baby Gap, newborn, preemie, 1 to 5 pounds. And someone else said, no! Write 0. We can clothe the 0-pound baby. We're the Gap. A pocket? Does a 0-pound baby need a pocket? A 0-pound baby has neither arms nor legs. They do not need a pocket. Those of you that are parents know, when you become a parent, you know precious little about parenting. I mean, they sent this baby home with us, 17 days old, and all they told us was she has to poop 4 to 5 times a day. And that makes sense, right? I mean, that's her head, that's her bottom. How long could it take, right? The bottle's longer than she is. She came home on a Thursday and pooped 4 times. Okay. That's within the normal range. Not going to be one of those fathers that insists on the 5th poop. Friday, nothing. And we can't call anyone because it's Shabbos. Saturday, again, nothing. This baby now has 8 to 10 poops floating around in her body. And there's nothing we can do. I don't know if you know this, but in Jerusalem in late July, when you have a baby that's not pooping, Shabbat goes out at like 4 o'clock in the morning. Finally, Shabbat goes out, and we call the pediatrician. We say, she's not pooping. The doctor says a baby poops 4 to 5 times a day or once a week. How can that be? How can it be that the normal range, totally normal, nothing is wrong, is 28 to 35 times a week? Or once. The day she was born, I held this little girl in my hands. I'd never held my own child. I had no idea this would be my reaction. But with a full heart, with a complete heart, I looked at this little girl and I said, all I want for you is to be happy. That's it. Just happy. And married. But that is it. Happy and married to a Jew. But that is it. All I want for you is to be happy and married to a Jew and educated. But that is really, religiously and secularly, of course. 17 days later, I'm holding the same baby thinking, just poop! When my parents named me, they named me Christopher. When I converted, the rabbi said, you're going to need a new name. So I reread Exodus. And I came back to him with 2 names. He said, you can't have the first one, it's a girl's name. I suppose today I'm glad I'm not Daphna. I chose Yisrael for all of its meanings. The land of Israel, the God of Israel, the people Israel. But what it actually means is he who wrestles with God. Actually, that's the perfect name for me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Shalom. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thank you. When Elie Wiesel died, the angels were so impressed, they sent him right to heaven. No Kaddishes, no 11 months, nothing. Right to heaven. And in heaven, the angels were more impressed. They sent him right in to see God. So Elie Wiesel has been dead for about 15 minutes and he's standing before God. And God says, "Nu, tell me something about yourself." What do you say to God? He can't think of anything to say. So God says, "Tell me a joke." Wiesel thinks and he says, "Well, I only really know Holocaust jokes." So he thinks of his best Holocaust joke. And he tells God. It's such a good joke, he giggles a little himself. And he looks at God, nothing. Blank. Crickets. And Wiesel says, "Well, I guess you had to be there."